Welcome everyone to Read the Book First. This week, Amanda is back for another Amanda episode.
Hi, I know you've missed me. I've missed me.
Today, Amanda and I are going to be talking about Roald Dahl's 1988 children's classic, Matilda.
This was written in 1988?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Dang. I
Yeah.
think Roald Dahl's books are so much older than they are.
Well, they are old. It's just this one is one of the newer ones. I'm right now because I'm curious. I need to look at a chronological list. James the Giant Peach was 61. Charlie and Chocolate Factory 64. Um, The Twits in the 80s, BFG 82, The Witches 83, Matilda 88. So he was publishing kids' books from
So there's also
1943.
like a 5-year gap.
Yes. So he was publishing kids' books from 1943 until 1991.
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a huge span. If you think about people who are writing kid literature in the 40s, I'm thinking of Madeline, I'm thinking of The Hobbit. Not much I can think of off the top of my head, right? Eh,
See, I'm thinking see see Dick run, see Jane run. And that's about all
yeah.
I got.
I mean, but I'm talking about actually like good
Good
offense
books.
to the people who wrote those books.
Real
Good books.
literature.
And then if you think in the 90s, by the 90s we have way more options, So it is interesting that Roald Dahl's
Yes.
writing literally spans that whole period, which is and like his work is not like he didn't have consistent hits, but there was every decade he had a couple hits, which is really impressive for an
Yeah.
author. Yeah.
It really is. And I think there's something to be said about, well, first of all, I need to make this joke. James and the Giant Peach reads like a first novel. Um, Secondly, Roald Dahl has such a fun sense of whimsy and like capturing what it's like to be a child. And I appreciate that, even
Hmm.
though there are other parts of him that kind of suck.
Yes. As many white British men from the 1900s, he wasn't perfect. Before we dive into actually talking about the book, what is your like when you think of Roald Dahl, which book jumps out at you like it's the like what was like your Roald Dahl book? Because everyone kind of has one that they checked out a lot or read a lot.
I'm not allowed to say all of them, right? That's like not on
No,
the table.
no. I'm
Okay.
like what's the one that pops out at you? Because everyone has a different one. Like obviously we can now name like
Witches.
five. Which is the one that pops out at you?
Witches. I read
Interesting.
Witches like endlessly, if only because we also read it in my fourth grade class. But I might have read it before that. I don't really remember. I just thought it was so delightfully creepy. And then Matilda's the other really big one that I read over and over again.
Hmm.
And like I read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory every now and then. It wasn't as big of one for me as those aforementioned. Maybe because there's exactly like two female characters.
Yeah. My Roald Dahl book was the BFG. The BFG is the one I read a lot. I loved the BFG. And there was a book on tape that I would get from the library that was excellent. And I would listen to it a lot. But besides that, funny story thing that you mentioned the witches, and I've probably told you this before, Amanda, but in fifth grade, I won a contest in my classroom, and the award was a copy of The Witches by Roald Dahl. And I was so excited to bring it home because I had read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I loved. I also read the sequel for that one, and I loved the BFG. And I was so excited to read it, but my mom saw it was called The Witches, and this was like during the like period when many Christian households were like anything with witches and wizards is evil and you need to get it out. And so my mom, who it's like not in character for her today at all, but she was just like, "You're not reading this," and made me get rid of it, um, and regifted it to someone else for a birthday party. To this day, I've not read The Witches. I've not even seen the movie, but I have seen parts. Okay, I've seen parts of the movie in Italian when I was in Rome with my brother and my friends, and we went to a random restaurant, and it was like a family little restaurant, and they were playing the movie version of The Witches, but it was dubbed over in Italian because we were in the suburbs of Rome. So that is the conclusion to The
That's
Witches story.
See, I haven't seen the Witches movie. Mostly because, like, I think I got in, like I said, my teacher read it in fourth grade. And again, I don't remember if I read it before then, but I got really into it after fourth grade. And at that point, I didn't really watch movies. I just
Mhm.
watched cartoons.
Matilda. So when I was reading this, I discovered that I've never actually read this because or if I have read it, I have zero memory of reading it. I have deep memories about the movie, which I'll talk about next week on our movie episode. I don't think I've ever read this, even though I had a copy of it on my bookshelf for a long time, on my classroom bookshelf, to be fair. So I probably just picked it up at like a Goodwill or something. But in my head, I
Yeah.
was just like, yeah, I've read Matilda. And then reading as I read this, I was like, nope, I have not read Matilda. Which is fun to read a Roald Dahl book for the first time, but as a 31-year-old, wild.
It is kind of a wild experience because, like, as you correctly predicted, I sat and I read it in like a half an hour plus maybe 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And again, it's not like it's like a super, super short book, but it's made for like kids,
It's
not
made for
like middle
8-year-olds.
grade. It's made for 8-year-olds, so the prose is pretty simple. He keeps it moving, and like so many plot points happen in the last 20 pages, and it's kind of hilarious. And it's okay,
Yes.
because like, honestly, I respect the fact that this man understands that a lot of small children don't have good attention spans.
So I agree. The plot of this book is like essentially all at the last 20 pages. But when I was researching about how this book came to be, I don't think that was on purpose. I think that was due to how much editing he had to do when he changed the original manuscript. Um, I guess
Hmm.
should I save the fun facts for the end?
Yeah, probably.
I'll explain the original manuscript issues at the end, but let's dive in. A brief synopsis for whoever has not watched or read Matilda. We have Matilda, who is a young girl who is wicked smart and has really crappy parents, and she ends up finding the best teacher in the world and wanting to save her and also gain independence. And there's a big bully teacher. She has magic powers, and the magic powers help her create a happily ever after. That's kind of a quick synopsis.
That's pretty much the story. It's this 5-year-old girl, and I always forget that she's five because
Hmm.
what's her name? Mara Wilson is like at least 8 in the movie.
Yes. Yeah. So the beginning of the book, we immediately find out Matilda's parents are just the worst people. Uh, Her dad's a used car salesman. Her mom loves bingo and doesn't like mothering. They're obsessed with their son who's older and kind of not smart in a kind of way of me saying that. Um and Matilda essentially teaches herself how to read by the age of 5.
But also the book starts off with a really like fun intro where it's like, yes, most parents sit there and they think that their children are absolutely wonderful and the best thing ever, ever, ever. But unfortunately, that's not true. If I was a teacher, I wish I could tell certain teach parents that their kids sucked. And it's
Hmm.
like interesting. I mean, very on occasion.
As two teachers, we can not confirm nor deny that sentiment of wishing we could tell parents that their kids in the moment sucked.
Yeah. I mean, like I could think of there's probably at least one kid a year where you just kind of want to say, dude. But anyway, I have a job. I'd like to keep it.
Exactly.
So after this little piece of like, yes, most parents think this, but then every now and then you get parents that are not nice and like don't like their kids, and then it's even worse when their kid is like extraordinary, like Matilda, and then that's when they go off about how terrible her parents are and how
Hmm.
wonderfully smart she is, and that's where the anti-TV blunt comes in.
Yeah, that's I think what shocked me the most about the beginning is because this book is very similar to the movie, you know, the or reverse. The movie is very true to the book, just coming from the perspective of someone who has never read this book but has seen the movie dozens of times in her life. That I thought it was very interesting how close they are. But the thing that shocked me was just that, like, I love Roald Dahl's how he is not gentle with the adult character. He's like just straight up, yeah, they suck. Also, they love TV. Maybe we as a society shouldn't be glued to our TVs. I just found that like you could tell that he was putting his thoughts about, current society when he was writing this in the mid 80s, like right straight into that.
And it's also funny because, like, I mean, it shows up even in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Like, you've read that, right?
Oh yeah, I love that one.
But yeah, like, there's a whole character named Mike TV whose entire crime
Yes.
is that he watches too much TV. Like, of
Yes.
course he has an anti-TV bent, and that was written in the 60s when
Yes.
TV, like, was a thing, but not nearly as much of a thing as TV in the 80s for kids. It's also so wild because she literally like walks herself to the library like every day as soon as she
Mm-hmm.
figures out how. Because her mom goes to bingo every day and leaves her 4-year-old child by herself, which is
Yes.
again absolutely wild. Um,
And illegal.
and
BT dubs.
and super illegal.
This is in England, but I'm assuming still super illegal there.
So yeah, she walks herself to the library, plops herself in, reads all the kids' books, and then one day like run out of kids' books, so she goes up to the librarian and bless, but the librarian is sitting there being like, huh, it's so weird that a little kid has come here on her own, wants to read all these deep, intense classic literature, including Tess de Uberville, which includes a woman being assaulted, which is like, huh, what
Yeah,
a choice.
I
Um,
the librarian, I love that the librarian's like, I guess I'll let you read these classics, but she also, I'm like, she's hesitant at first, right? She's like, are you sure you don't want to read these kid books? And Matilda's like, I've already read the kid books. And she's like, okay, well, and then Matilda reads these really intense classics. On page 12, there's a list. I don't have my library book anymore because I returned it like a good library kid. I love that Matilda is telling the librarian, she goes, I like reading these because I can tell they're talking about really deep stuff, but I'm not really grasping all the concepts. Like she kind of, you can tell she's not understanding like the very like intense scenarios a lot of these books are talking about, or like the political stuff the books are talking about. But she's like, but I enjoy it because it's challenging my brain. Like that's like kind of her whole thing. And I really love the
yeah.
librarians like, okay, have fun.
See, I just like so my thing is, and maybe this is a holdover from like my thoughts and feelings about musicals, about the musical specifically. But literally, like, I'm like, ma'am, why are you not more concerned about the fact that this 4-year-old comes in on her own and her parents don't seem to like be involved at all? Ma'am, I feel like, are you not a mandated reporter?
The 80s were a different time.
I will have
Question,
to.
question. When was the youngest that you were like allowed to stay home alone?
That's a hard question to answer because I have memories that my parents say are not true. Because I remember being able to stay home alone a lot earlier than I actually was allowed to, shockingly. Um, but I want to say maybe, maybe 8, more likely 9 or 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just like my sister had a game, and more often than not, they just made me come anyway.
I think I remember staying home by myself, like while my mom ran to the nearby convenience store to get like milk or like whatever random thing she needed for groceries, like when I was like 8 or so. But at the same time, I think it's interesting. The setting of this book is a small town British town in the 80s. So it's a little bit different. Because I was thinking about this 4-year-old slash 5-year-old. I'm pretty sure she's 5 at this point, but that's what my notes say. So you can double check me, but the book of a 5-year-old coming into the library and the librarian not being as concerned about a kid being on her own at that age because me and my friends, when we were 8, were running all over the neighborhood, like in the woods, walking miles. And my parents were just like, go have fun, be back by this time. And that's because I grew up in a small town. Sure, it was the late 90s, early 2000s. at that point, so a little bit different safety issues and measures, and culturally a little different. But I think part of it is that in a small town, it's not as unheard of to see young kids with two working parents, supposedly working parents. Like we, the audience, knows that her mom is just going to play bingo and not actually working. Whereas, the librarian could just be assuming, oh, her parents are working, so I guess she's come to the library, not to like
Yeah, I mean,
defend the librarian not calling CPS or whatever they have in England, because she should have, because that would have solved this plot of this book, um, more or less. But, you know, I understand why she was not like shocked that this kid showed up.
in my middle school, or yeah, it was in my middle school, they had like a poster for some reason that talked about how long you should leave kids alone by age. And they talk about like when they're 8, you can leave them alone for like a little while during the day, never at night, and this and this and this. So that's part of where my perspective comes from is
Hmm.
I was sitting there being like, yes, I wish I was allowed to stay home by myself more often, but also it's probably good that I did it.
No, I think that makes
Anyway,
sense. But anyways, Matilda, our girl, loves books because Roald Dahl loves books. And if anything, you get anything from this book, is that we should all love books.
have you ever read his Twisted Tales nursery rhymes?
No.
There's a little like bit in there where he talks about like how, because the people in his illustrations are always, if they're mean, they're ugly and gross and this and this.
Mm,
And I wondered if he was catching flack from that even back then because he puts in a little blurb in his Twisted Tales of bad people are ugly, and here's why bad people are ugly. Because even if you have like a crooked tooth and too big nose and this and this and this, if you're nice, people will see the niceness inside of you. Whereas when you're ugly, it makes everything about you awful. And it's like, I mean, fair enough. And I just like to always think about that every time I read his books.
yeah, I mean, he didn't do the illustrations. He had, I forget the illustrator's name off the top of my head.
Quentin Blake.
Yeah, and he did, who did all the very famous illustrations for all his books. And I do like that they are very cohesive um throughout the books, but there's very understandable and an appropriate like critique of like why do like with the other villains too, right? This is not just the thing that happens in Roald Dahl's illustrated books, whereas if villains are ugly or villains are like their bodies are, you know, different than the quote normal heroes, right? So like that is just, keep that in mind, and like I think it's a very important thing, right? Like why are Disney villains ugly, or why are characters and villains in literature, the ones that have a hook for a hand, like that's a
Hmm.
very like there's it's just as full of
Why
just
is Wormwood drawn with a super super long nose and hunched over
mm-hmm.
slightly, and his
Yeah.
wife is drawn as a larger woman?
Mm-hmm. It's just classic like ableist othering of bodies to make them seem more villainous. Um, so it is interesting, but what I found interesting specifically about the Matilda illustrations as I was reading is how much, again, I'll talk about this more when we talk about the movie, but how much the movie used the specific illustrations for
Hmm.
inspiration. And I think, spoiler to my thoughts on the movie, I think they did a really good job of using it as inspiration, but not a blueprint. You know, I thought they did a good job with that. Anyways, speaking of Mr. Wormwood, Matilda's dad, he is a used car so he's a used car salesman, and he is just a straight up crook. He's put throwing sawdust in cars. He's reversing the odometer on used cars, and just being the stereotypical used car salesman crook.
Hmm.
Um, and he's awful.
And he's
Um,
always trying to get like Michael, the older brother, into it by being like, add up all of this math for me so you can see how clever I am. And then he gets
mhm.
mad when Matilda does it immediately. And it's like, dude, I wish you weren't a sexist little prick because you could have made so much money off of your daughter.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's
I mean,
kind
I
of
don't wish that. I don't
yeah.
wish that. But like,
Like it's good that her dad is dumb enough that not to use her abilities that are very blatantly there. You know what I mean? Like there's another version of this book where she is just being used for her ridiculous genius abilities, right? Um,
hmm
the first few chapters of this book after the introduction is Matilda messes with her parents. And this is just classic kids love when people pull pranks on adults. And it's very much that, but also we see how crappy her parents are to her and how neglectful they are to her. So it's like, okay, these pranks, understandable, you know.
so so something that I thought that I was reading this as I was reading this, I was like, man, her mom actually like doesn't do a lot, which is why she's a bad parent, just to be clear. But I was like, man, is there something to be said about like w the fact that all of these punishments are more focused on her father, and the mother's punishment is always kind of just incidental to that, and the way that her mom seems kind of like scared of her dad too. Is there some no there and it was interesting.
I read it as it's easier to see how much of a bad person her dad is. And I think her mom
hmm
is dealing with an emotionally abusive husband, if not also financially abusive or otherwise off page. I think her wanting, whenever she has a moment of free time, to go and play bingo away from her family, she's trying to literally escape. I think that her inaction to protect Matilda um shows that she's just trying to protect herself. I don't think that she is uh she's definitely still guilty of being a neglectful parent. Absolutely, but I think it's as a an adult who has seen many parents of kids either in classrooms or friends or just people I know in my different communities deal with abusive partners and or family members. This just read like cycle of abuse to me. And I don't think Roald Dahl tried to do that perfectly. I think he just wanted to focus his dad, the dad being the bad guy, and just had to
Mm-mm.
include the mom. I think he just probably saw a pattern of this somewhere. I don't think he really purposely did that, but I think it's easy to read the situation as that.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that kind of switched me off of that is when Miss Honey comes up a little bit later, but we can talk about that when we actually get to Miss Honey instead of talking
Yeah.
about not Miss
Um,
Honey.
some of the pranks Matilda does is she super glues her dad's hat, so that when he puts his hat on, it gets stuck and they have to cut a lot of his hair off. Her one little friend that she meets before school has a parrot, and she like gets the parrot to go in the fireplace chimney and essentially like pretend to be a ghost and haunt um her family. I found this prank really funny. Also poor parrot, but also thank you for your service, parrot. It was just I thought it's a good prank. That's a solid one.
Isn't what her dad does that particular time to like set her off in this is he destroys like a library book?
Hmm.
Yeah, because that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is like all of these incidents are being set off by her dad doing something like
Like calling her stupid or
calling her stupid, blowing up at her for like solving the math correctly.
hmm
And then like destroying a library book and mocking her for being upset about it. Just all this kind of like stuff, which is the other reason I think this is such a fun tale for kids too, is
hmm
kids like trickster tales
Oh, absolutely. We
where
all
like
do.
the people who yeah, I mean we all do, but I'm just saying like in terms of children's literature.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that I think Roald Dahl also persists is there's that whimsy and also that sense of karmic retribution.
Yes. Absolutely. She also ends up tricking him to dye his hair awful blonde. As a teacher and someone who's dealt with a lot of kids in my life, I think part of obviously we want to see Matilda get her get back on her dad. Like we want to see her dad suffer because he's a being a bad parent and a bad person. But it's also the classic, like, when kids want attention, they throw these huge, elaborate fits sometimes. And you just see at this point in the book, as again, I read this for the first time as a 31-year-old adult instead of being, like an 8 or 9-year-old. I just saw poor Matilda at this point being like
Hmm.
screaming for she wants attention, she wants love, she wants someone to be like, wow, read this book to me. Like she doesn't even, she doesn't need endless praise. She just needs someone to talk to her at this point is how I saw her. Um, and it was very heartbreaking to read. It's funny, but also in my head, I'm like, I can put a dozen names to the similar situations I've seen of kids throwing big old fits to get attention. Um,
It's so funny because I've always read that as the complete opposite of she does this because they're interfering with what she is currently doing.
mhm.
So I always read it as let me throw this fit so that they get off my back for a while. Or not throw this fit, let me do this prank so that they get some bad
Distract.
karma and they chill out.
Yeah.
Yes, distract slash I'm gonna do this so they leave me alone and I get back to doing what I want to do.
But they never leave her alone though. Like for like a second, like directly after, but you know.
Well, I mean, she gets left alone every day.
Well, yeah. And that's why I think you know, she needs attention, I
I
think.
mean, she does. Everybody needs attention.
Yes, I think it's a bit of both. I do think I agree with you that it's like I do see that, very strong sense of justice in Matilda. Like she wants hmm we'll get on that later. I do see that, but I also just see like this traumatized kid at the same time, you know?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, her parents are finally done dealing with her shenanigans and realize that she is big enough to go to school. Um, so they get her or allow her to go to school. Does she? I forget. Does she like talk them into letting her go earlier? No.
No, not in
Okay.
this one.
Okay.
Um,
I just couldn't
they're
remember.
they're just like, oh, okay, she has to go to school. Well, I guess that's one place that we can just dump her all day.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
meet Miss Honey.
hmm And Miss Honey's her teacher, and Miss Honey is very sweet, and her classroom is very organized, but that's because in this whole school, it is like tyrannically organized because of the headmistress. Um, but right away in class, Miss Honey sees and acknowledges Matilda's ability to read, write, and just a higher academic level than what typical kids her age should be at. Um,
Yeah,
and so
it's kind of nuts because like, they're sitting here doing all this like first day of school stuff like, "Hi, I'm Miss Honey. Today we're gonna learn times tables." And I'm like, these kids are 5 and they're learning times tables? Granted, the two times tables are not hard, but shouldn't they start with like addition?
I mean,
Crazy idea.
part of this is I think I agree. It is like, whoa, the first thing they're doing is learning times tables, but I think that's because of the them trying to portray the school as so like military and like what I mean? Like and also schools in media, especially in the 80s, this is how schools very like everyone had a desk and everyone stayed at their desk and it was very old school teaching style, right? So it but like we would not see this today. Absolutely not, obviously. In a kindergarten classroom. Absolutely not. No circle time? Are you kidding me? Um
It's really funny because like it's the first day of school and quite literally Matilda is just sitting there and like Miss Honey has like a laser focus on her for like a good like 10-20 minutes to the point where she even says to herself, I know I'm supposed to think about the other kids too, but like this one little kid and it's like dang, the favoritism.
as we go on, I at the end towards the end of the book, I want to talk about is whether Miss Honey is a good teacher or not. We can have that discussion later. Anyways, Miss Honey sees this gifted kid and is like, okay, I'm gonna go to Headmistress Trunchbull and ask if Matilda can skip a grade because she deserves to have an education more apt to her ability. And the Trunchbull denies it. So the Trunchbull is like, why would you do this? I have no proof. You're lying. This kid's lying. She just memorized stuff. Anyone can memorize stuff. Like, and just is like, no. Denied.
I have it on good authority that her dad said that you're just trying to get rid of her.
Hmm. Yeah. So
Okay. Sure, ma'am.
We find out that Matilda's dad has told Trunchbull that Matilda's a troublemaker, that she's no good and she's rotten, and that essentially watch out for her. She's gonna need, a mindful eye on it, which is what a viewpoint of his daughter.
It is kind of funny the like implication that is kind of sprinkled in those early chapters that her dad knows that she's behind these pranks, but he can't prove it. He can't prove it, so he has to just let it go.
Hmm. Is it the next day or like that week that Miss Honey goes to their house?
It's the next day, yeah. It might even
So
be that very night.
yeah, which this is like we have to remind ourselves this is a kid plot timeline we're dealing with, so it has to be one day later, right? Or a day or two later,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Um, but Miss Honey goes to Matilda's home and talks to her parents and be like, "Your kid is very gifted. I believe that she needs to go to the next grade." Trunchbull said no, but maybe if you came and talked to Trunchbull and agreed with me that she is talented, that we can get her up a grade. And her parents absolutely are like, no.
And this is the first time that her mom actually like objectively says something that's like noticeably awful because she sits there and is like, girls don't need books. They need looks. Like, obviously, you have your little thing going on there, but obviously, I'm married and I have a great life, and my husband does all the work, and I am a homemaker, and just like all this like crazy stuff. Not crazy, but like, in retrospect, very much yes, I'm definitely fine and everything is good and my life is better.
Hmm. I read her mom's response as so defensive because, like, here is this lady coming to their house and saying, "Hey, you don't know your kid. Your kid is better than what you think they are." And I also truly believe that Matilda's mom does value her having a husband and being a homemaker over Miss Honey being a teacher. Like, she definitely values that as the preferred way of being a woman. Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I think she sees Miss Honey as such a threat, and someone questioning their way of life.
Yeah. She basically just gives Matilda textbooks and is like, hey, sit with this textbook while we do this other thing. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Read this stuff while we're doing other work, but you still have to memorize things for when Trunchbull comes in and does her little observations weekly. And as Matilda's at school, we start learning more about Headmistress Trunchbull. One of the older kids tells Matilda and Lavender, who is one of Matilda's friends at school, about the Trunchbull, and about how this is on page 103, about how Trunchbull throws kids and just like the deviousness of Trunchbull and how to stay on her good side and to watch out. I love the older kids telling Matilda and Lavender about this because as we go on and as we do, because we see all the events of this book through Matilda, right? And so we have no reason not to believe her. But like the things that Trunchbull does as this book goes on are just more and more ridiculous. And it's like, again, as a 31-year-old reading this, I'm like, kids when they tell stories on the playground, they get wilder and wilder, right? I'm like, but I'm like in my head, I'm like, how it's kind of fun to think about like, is what we're seeing exactly what's going on, or is this a
Hmm.
kid's bigger version of it? It just was like, interesting.
See, and I didn't take it that way. But the thing that I really do enjoy is watching the older kid be like, "Yeah, I did this thing and it got me in trouble, and then I did this thing and it got me in trouble." And both Matilda and Lavender are like, "Oh, so cool."
Yeah, and they're like, there's a line about how the kids have to band together and but Matilda and Violet can't because they're too young. In a year or two they can help join like this like resistance the kids are creating. And I'm like, are the kids unionizing on the playground?
Um, do you mean Lavender? You called her Violet.
Oh,
That's an
yes, I'm at
entirely
Lavender.
different that's an entirely different Roald Dahl minor character with a name of that means purple.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's because I'm allergic to lavender. I don't want to even say it.
Oh, that's so fair.
We have the iconic chapter of Bruce Bog Trotter forced to eat a whole chocolate cake. And we'll talk about that cake when we talk about the movie. But like this poor kid just trying to be humiliated in front of his whole school and like the forceful eating, but also ruining such a delightful thing.
Of chocolate.
hmm So the Trunchbull every week goes and essentially does like a mini lesson at every classroom to make sure that the teachers are not teaching whatever Trunchbull and whoever else is in charge of the school has declared is supposed to be taught. And so on Fridays, she comes into Miss Honey's classroom and
Thursdays.
sorry, on Thursdays, she comes into Miss Honey's classroom and she asks the kids to like quote different times tables and letters and, just essentially pop quizzing them, but in a very like military way where they have to all say it at the same time. When they are spoken to, they have to stand up and say, um, Miss very like please and thank you, like Miss Trenchbull, like very
Ma'am.
specific, very specific ways of talking. Otherwise, they're gonna be punished. And there's multiple ways of being punished. Some of them uh more physical than others. Like we have seen the cold cake scenario. We have rumors of her throwing kids. Like there's a lot going on.
She did throw a kid like on page.
Yeah, I
It was a
know. I
poor
just didn't
little
know if it was
Amanda.
later. Yeah, I didn't know if
No,
it
it
had already
happened.
happened. Okay.
It
Because
happened previously.
at first they just talk about it and then we see because then we have that illustration of Amanda with the pigtails getting tossed. Yeah. So
Correct.
yeah, so these kids are under threat of physical harm as they're being educated. And you know,
The other thing that I really like is as Miss Trunchbull's doing her like drilling, she picks on specific kids throughout, and one of the kids she picks he's like thinking, okay, I got it memorized, I got it memorized, I got it memorized. And then she like breaks out with a ridiculous like word problem type question, and the poor kid doesn't know it. And she's like, oh, well, you're supposed to be able to know how to apply this. And I'm like, do you think Roald Dahl had teacher friends or like knew people who designed tests? Because this feels personal.
uh, I've anti-standardized testing, anti-trunchbull. They seem very similar veins to me. Um, um, during one of the observations, Lavender is in charge of Miss Trunchbull's water, and Lavender decides to put a little newt in her water glass. Um,
Because
and
she's
I,
so inspired by the tales of bravery of the older
yes,
kids,
because
and
they
she
want
just
to join
wants to be
this,
like them.
they want to join the resistance. She's as Trunchbull is interrogating the kid who can't solve the word problem. She's taking a drink of water, and she gets super scared by the newt. And then Matilda is just like so upset about the whole situation that she is able to tell
Well, no,
kinetically. What?
Trunchbull accuses Matilda of being the one to put the newt in there,
Yeah.
even though it's like blatantly impossible for that to be true.
Yeah.
Um, so because of that accusation, that's what makes Matilda like go off and do the thing that you're about to say.
Yeah, she's able to telekinetically knock over the water, um, and just like which, shocks and terrifies everyone. And um after school that day, Matilda, Miss Honey, Miss Honey brings Matilda home to her little cottage to have tea after this incident, which is
Yes.
a choice. But we do find out more about Miss Honey here. She lives in this little cottage, like through the woods. There's no indoor plumbing. There's no like proper kitchen. She has a little like Bunsen burner
Heat.
situation. Yeah, she's she's roughing it. Like she has a little tiny cottage, bare bones, but she's very seems happy in this cottage.
To be fair to Miss Honey, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure that like Matilda either bursts into tears or is like, I need to talk to you right now about something very like intense.
Yes, yes.
In all
Yeah.
fairness to her.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a
And
Miss Honey defender.
and Matilda tells her about these telekinetic powers that she's just recently discovered.
Today.
And that day. And and in response, Miss Honey's like, "What if I tell her about my childhood trauma?"
Here. In all fairness, she's like, "Why are you living in this house?" And she's like, "Oh, because I don't have a lot of money. Don't they pay you well?" Well, yes, but a lot of my money has to go to my aunt. And then she's like, "Why does the money have to go to your aunt?" And Honey's like, "I don't want to tell you." And then Matilda's like, "But tell me." And then that's how it comes about. It's not like Miss Honey casually, I mean, she does trauma dump, but it's prompted by Matilda continuing to ask questions.
The trauma dump is for the plot, because Roald Dahl is like, this story needs to go
Yeah.
somewhere. So I guess now's the time it's gonna go somewhere.
We can't just continue to have Matilda having adventures and like messing with people.
Exactly. Uh, but Miss Honey tells Matilda that Miss Honey's mom died when she was 2, and her evil aunt came to help take care of her, as her dad worked, and her dad died when she was 5 due to a mysterious accident of sorts.
Hmm.
And so this evil aunt continued to force Miss Honey to do chores, and it wasn't until more recently that she was able to escape to this cottage. Um, and
Saving like literally $1 a day or something
yeah,
crazy
because
like
she has to
that.
pay back like rent essentially to her aunt. Do we find out at this point that
We find
I
out
think we do? Yeah. I just
at
didn't
the
write it
very
down.
end of the chapter.
Yeah, that Miss Trunchbull is the evil aunt. And so not only is she stuck working at this school, um, she fought really hard to leave the house she was stuck at with Trunchbull to go and get her teaching education to become a teacher. But then Trunchbull's like, "Hey, you have to pay me for all the years you lived in this house because I got your dad's will and I get to keep the house. So therefore, you owe me rent or some BS." And
It's basically like a parent saying to a kid, "Hey, you should be more grateful because I gave you food all of these years." And it's always like,
mm-hmm,
as opposed to what? Starving me?
mm-hmm, yep. Yeah. And as soon as Matilda hears Miss Trunchbull is the one that had done all this horrible stuff to Miss Honey, Matilda's like, ah, my bully I need to conquer is no longer my father. It is now Miss Trunchbull. And so she goes and she starts practicing her telekinetic powers. We
Hmm.
get a training montage all of Rocky, but it's a child and telekinetic.
It's a child with telekinetic powers just sitting in her room lifting her dad's cigar over and over and over again.
Yep. Yeah. And her plan, her that she's able to enact the next time Trunchbull comes in to uh observe slash
Well, see, it's not really an observation. They are straight up, she
yeah.
just takes over the class.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not an observation in the way that we think of observation. It is uh, a test. I want to test these kids on their performance and knowledge. Matilda uses her telekinetic power to use chalk to write on the chalkboard from Magnus, or this is Magnus, Agatha, give my whatever Miss Honey's first name.
Jenny,
Yeah, Jenny,
give
her
my
house
Jenny her
back
house back.
from
You
Magnus.
murdered me. Yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada.
And this
Very
terrifies,
spooky.
yeah, this terrifies Trunchbull, and she leaves town. And she leaves town. Miss Honey gets the home to the deed. And also this time, Matilda's parents are getting run out of town because everyone's
Well,
discovered.
okay, before that, we got to talk
Yes.
about the fact that Matilda then gets put up in a higher class because Miss Trunchbull's no longer the headmistress, it's this other teacher. So she gets the chance to move up to a different class, and she's like, Miss Honey, I don't think I have my powers anymore. And Miss Honey's like, yeah, because your brain's being properly challenged. And I'm like, cool. So if I just was bored, I could make telekinetic powers by not using my brain.
Yeah. Let's wrap up the book plot and then we can talk about all the things I want to talk about. So yeah, Trunchbull runs away. Matilda gets to a higher class. Miss Honey
She
gets the
spends
deed
a
to
lot
her
of time with
home.
Miss Honey,
Yeah,
like
and then
after
her
school.
mhm. And Matilda's parents are getting run out of town because everyone's discovering how much of a scammer her dad is, and so they're running to Spain. And at the last minute, Matilda gets Miss Honey to adopt her, in quotes, adopt, um, so that she can stay there. And that's how the book
Yeah,
ends. And it's a cute little drawing of Miss Honey holding Matilda. That drawing was really cute. Um,
that was.
but okay, so let's talk about Matilda's powers. Um, so in the book, they explain it, yes, that she was just not being, her brain was not being challenged enough, and that's why she had these weird telekinetic powers. Also, I would argue that this book is saying if you're traumatized enough, you also will have powers. It's kind of also what the book is leading to people. Like if I was like a little kid and I was like, "Oh, this girl had a really hard life. That's why she has powers." And so if I had a hard life, I would also have powers. Like that is kid logic that I can see people jumping to, you know?
Hmm. Correct.
And the telekinetic powers also don't play a huge role in the book overall. They are very important to the plot and solving of the plot, but they don't show up towards, halfway through and they're in like two, three scenes, maybe
Yeah,
four. And I thought that was
yeah,
interesting on the reread because I thought it was going to be way more than that. So I thought that was
yeah.
interesting.
It
Um,
really is. And it's also just kind of one of those, it's very clear that this is, even though we joke about, plot being introduced halfway through, this
mhm.
is very much like a Roald Dahl story where it's not so much a plot as it's a story about a character going through different episodes of
Yes.
things.
Yes.
That's all
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Um, let's talk about Miss Honey and whether or not she's a good teacher. I think I think Miss Honey has the best intentions. I think she is obviously a product of childhood abuse from Trunchbull herself, and she is stuck in working for her abuser. You know,
Hmm.
she's trapped into poverty. So I feel for Miss Honey. I still don't think she's a great teacher based off the fact that she brings Matilda. So I think it was good that she reached out to Matilda's parents and was like, "Hey, your kid should be higher up in a different grade." And they're like, "No." And then the next day she brought Matilda to her house. That's sketchy. You know.
Hmm. As I told, so I made like a while ago, I did a top 10 with my friends about like top 10 best fictional teachers. They were
Hmm.
all shocked and appalled at me that I put Honey so low on the list because I think I put her at like number 10. And I'm like, look, she's a good teacher. She cares about her kids. But here's the thing, she's got a boundaries issue.
Hmm.
Like, she clearly, Matilda's her favorite kid in the class, and you can never let it be obvious which kid is your favorite in the class.
Hmm.
You just can't. Um, And then also the fact that she brings her to her house multiple times, even after
without
she's no
parent
longer
permission.
without parent permission. Like, dude, I know it's the 80s and like we don't understand stranger danger that well. And we don't understand, I mean, we do understand stranger danger, but not good. And also the idea that, hey, maybe you shouldn't let people have un access to kids unless they've been there with other people is
Yeah.
good. Is bad,
Like
actually.
growing up, I went to some of my teachers' houses because their kids were my friends. Like I wasn't there because Mr. So and so's house. I was like, no, their daughter was one of my closest friends, and we're the same age. And that was like, that's why I was there for a birthday party. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
so I agree with you. I don't think she's an evil teacher. I don't think she's a bad teacher. I think she's a misguided teacher who made some poor choices as far as Matilda, right?
Yeah, and I think like that's the thing too, is like this almost as much as this is a childhood fantasy of like oh, you meet this nice person who sees you for everything and you get adopted by them. This is also a
Mm-hmm.
very teacher fantasy of
Mm-hmm.
like this child in a bad situation, I'm gonna be the one to save them. And it's like,
Yeah. To be fair, a
eh.
problematic teacher fantasy, not one that we have as teachers, one that people online do and talk about.
I mean, I will speak only for myself.
Hmm.
Sometimes there are kids that whatever's going on with them, you just really wish you could help out more.
Yeah,
But the fact of the matter is, the answer is usually not taking them into your house and adopting away from their family.
hmm. No, I agree. So I think as far as literary teachers go, I don't think she's nearly the best, but I don't think she's the worst because she's not evil. She's just making bad decisions, and
She's
then
not evil. Yeah,
she's making decisions that would maybe make her lose her teaching license if she was teaching today.
yes. But also, the other thing that we may need to take into consideration is how much of this is also a product of it being in the 80s.
Oh, it's totally part of that. Yeah. Can we talk about how Matilda is gifted?
Yeah, the hyperlexicness of it all.
Yes. Do so when I've seen like people make little listicles on like Instagram and stuff of characters that are neurodivergent coded, Matilda's one that consistently pops up. And I think that's a fair read on Matilda from our knowledge of in 2025 of various, you know, neurodivergence,
Hmm.
whatever you want to, label Matilda. I don't think Roald Dahl had that in mind when he was writing it, though. You know what I mean?
No, but it's very much a this have met really, really smart kids, and I've met kids that are super, super into books, and
Hmm.
they act like this.
Yeah.
And I think it's accidentally writing people who are neurodivergent without actually writing them because you just
Yes.
write what you know. But fun
Yeah.
fact, did you know that neurodivergent people exist in the real world?
Right. Wild. Do you want to hear some fun facts? Then I can talk about the creation of the story and how I think it
Yes.
explains the weird pacing. So, first off, Trunchbull was based off a lady named Mrs. Patchett who owned a sweet shop in Cardiff where Roald Dahl grew up. And then Matilda's dad was based off a car salesman in the town where he grew up as well. So those are based off real people, which I thought was interesting. But originally, the first draft of this book, Matilda was originally a wicked and irrational girl who tortured parents and helped an unethical teacher win money via rigging a horse racing game. And then the first editor, who had worked with him for a long time, was like, hey, this. I think it's fun for a short story, but this is not really the vibe of a book we want right now. Can you rewrite it? And so he like struggled rewriting it and was able to eventually find a different editor who encouraged him to stick with rewriting it. So that's why the first half of this book of Matilda doing all the pranks, it is like very like prank heavy, like hee look at Matilda doing these really rascally things. And then halfway through, it suddenly switches to, oh, here's this almost angelic looking little teacher that Matilda's now gonna save, right? It's like this book is almost two different vibes. And I think it makes total sense of why it was that way.
That makes a lot of sense with the plot points of like Miss Honey being so fixated on, oh my gosh, this kid is so smart and so talented.
Hmm.
In the context of the original draft was, I can use this.
Hmm. I really enjoyed rereading this. I do think I would have liked it more if I was, 8 or 9 when I first read it. And if it was like a more nostalgic read, like if I was to reread the BFG right now, I would have a way better time. Not because I think that book is better or anything, but because I have that nostalgic pull to it, you know?
hmm I've
So
never read the BFG
I loved the BFG growing up.
or the Twits.
I never read that one either.
It's a fun kids book. It's a quick read if you haven't read it before. I think in terms of if you are a solid adult who hasn't read this and you're not reading it for the purposes of reading it to a child, you don't necessarily need to read it. You can just go watch the movie.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I am excited to rewatch the movie a lot. For listeners, the next episode and or two, we'll see how it's edited. We'll be discussing
I did it
the
did.
nine edited. We'll be discussing we'll be discussing the 96 film adaptation, the musical, and the movie musical that came out in 2022. So your homework is to go watch or listen to any of those things if you want to, but you don't have to because
It's
I'm not your
summer.
teacher.
We shouldn't have homework.
Thank you, Amanda, for being another guest. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Read the Book First Podcast. If you want to listen to more minisodes or watch my reading vlogs, go ahead and check out our Patreon. It is linked below. Follow us on your preferred platform. Make sure you rate us 5 stars. If it's not 5 stars, don't worry about it. Thank you for listening. And remember, read the book first.